Good morning. I'm a wanderer, so if I start fading off, just let me know. I'm Melanie Hooker. I'm the Executive Director of the Domestic Violence Coalition. I have been there for 16 years. I started off as a victim advocate, and I'm actually just 5 days ago celebrated 9 years as the Executive Director. I've got some of my board members in the audience, so I was like, oh, hey. So I want to start this off with, I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm going to tell you what we do, and I'm going to talk about specific people. And if this triggers you at all, if it starts making you feel any kind of way, please feel free to take care of yourself, go outside, go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to do, because I understand that I'm going to be sharing, I didn't get really graphic, I'll tell you that, but I'm going to share some stories that could really affect you, okay? So, the Domestic Violence Coalition started in 1996. Two ladies felt that the need for these services needed to continue in our community. They had been eliminated through a different organization, and they literally took a card table and chairs, set them up in a little office, and started providing assistance with personal protection orders. In 1999, we got federally funded, and we have been funded through several programs to this day. Some of the funding is VOCA, which is the Victim of Crime Act, VAWA, which is Violence Against Women's Act. We have some ARPA funds, which came through COVID. We have United Way funds, and we are one of only 2 counties in the state of Michigan that gets funds from our local government. So what we do, if you want to go to the next slide. So we have several programs. When I became director in 2015, we had the domestic violence program, hence our name, the Domestic Violence Coalition. Since then, we have added the TAP program, which stands for Teen Acceptance and Trust. We have a sexual assault program. We have several outreach programs that I'll talk about. We have offender services, and we have an emergency response team. So domestic violence, by law, this is what counts as domestic. So if you've ever been married to the person, in a dating relationship with the person, had a child with them, or lived with them. So it could be, and unfortunately we see this too often, children against parents, brothers and sisters, things like that. So anyone you've ever lived with, had a relationship with, had a child with, that would be domestic. We also provide services to what is referred to as non-domestic, which could be neighbors, co-workers, strangers, and so on. So there's multiple forms of abuse. There's physical abuse, there's sexual abuse, there's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, neglect or elder abuse, and financial exploitation, among many others. So within all of those, there's other forms of abuse that happens. All right, so with our domestic violence services, some of the things that we do, I'm going to preface this. So my office in Paw Paw, I have 4 victim advocates and 2 that provide offender services and myself. We're a very small office. Van Buren County has 76,000 people. Since 2015, we've served over 7,600 people, so 10% of our population are experiencing domestic violence. We have one of the highest rates behind Wayne County in the state, and we're not really sure why. So part of our services, most people come to us for a personal protection order. This would allow someone to feel safe in their home. It would order the abuser out of the home. It basically says the abuser cannot have contact with the petitioner. We go to court with them. We schedule hearings with them. We transport them. We sit with them one-on-one and just give them validation and someone to believe them. We have education classes. We offer free self-defense classes. We do therapy if we can. We provide referrals to housing, to DHHS, to any services they need. So basically, when someone comes in, we're sitting down with them, we're finding out the whole situation, we're giving them options of things that they can do so that they can try to be safer. One thing I'm going to preface, I never, ever make anyone leave if they're not ready. And the reason for that is I was speaking with a woman one time, and this was in the beginning of my career, and I was like, well, why don't you just leave them? We can get a protection order, we can get you somewhere safe. And she said, when I look across the room and I look into his eyes and I see it kind of going black, I know what's coming and I have a chance to get away. But when he's not with me and he comes through that door, I'm not prepared. Goosebumps still to this day. I never, ever have made someone, or tried to get someone to leave since then. So that's that. People say that all the time. Why don't they just leave? There's many reasons they don't just leave. They might not have finances, financial exploitation. They're not letting them work. They're taking their money. They're forcing them to stay home. I've seen cars get disabled. I've seen their jobs get, they go to their jobs, they call work and say they're on drugs, whatever. There's so many ways that these people are using tactics to get their loved ones to not have a job, to depend on them. Children, we still want a family, right? We think, oh, it's so much better for our children to have a mother and a father in the home. I always tell people, you know what? I think that your children would be much happier if they had two happy parents. And that doesn't mean you have to be together. But again, I'm not going to make them do what they want to do. So I'm going to tell you about one of the people that I helped. She came to me 8 years ago. Her husband was pretty well off. He was an executive in a local business. He was making a lot of good money. She was a stay-at-home mom with 4 young children. He got her addicted to drugs. He was very verbally and emotionally abusive to her. He was very controlling of all the money, of everything. And eventually it turned physical. So she came in to get help. We helped her get a personal protection order. With that, he was ordered out of the home and to have no contact with her. In retaliation, he decided he was going to take all the money and he was not going to help her or their 4 kids. So she came to me in tears. We were able to help her get food stamps. She couldn't get cash assistance because they were still legally married and he made a lot of money, but we were able to get her food assistance. And she came in one day and she's just like, I can't do it anymore. She was in tears. She's like, I think I'm going to terminate the PPO. And I said, what's going on? She's like, I can only wash clothes with baking soda so many times. I started what's called Ashley's Closet the next day. We started collecting all the stuff that you can't get on a food card, and we give them to our clients free. Clothes, shampoo, conditioner, laundry soap, all of that stuff. So that barrier was removed. She was able to eventually get a job. She moved out on her own with her 4 children. He was eventually arrested and put in jail for stalking. She came back to me just a few months ago. Hadn't seen her in 8 years. She came in to tell me that her boys were doing really well. One was in the military, one was a senior in band, all A's. The other 2 were doing really well in school. They were in sports. And she said, you saved our lives. And so that's why I do what I do. I don't know why it still chokes me up every time, but I don't really do this for the accolades. We don't do this for notoriety, but to know that I help these kids and I help this mom get away and get safe, and she's got a great job now, and the boys are doing well. That's why we do it. Okay, next. So one of my staff, his name is Rob, and Rob was a volunteer that came to us from California. He moved back here during COVID to be closer to his mom, and when I had an opening, I hired Rob. And when we were interviewing, he said there were 2 things he really wanted to bring to our agency. He wanted to bring LGBTQ plus services, and he wanted to work with kids. So he came up with this program, and it was specifically meant to target LGBTQ plus teens, right? So they're struggling. He recognized as a teen that went through this that sometimes families aren't welcoming when you come out. So he wanted to do this program, and as he started doing this program, he realized that there was a whole lot of other teens that weren't getting services either. A lot of services in all of our communities are geared to that 0 to 5, but they're not realizing that there are kids 12 to 18 that also lived in domestic violence, that also have been abused, that have also perpetrated violence. So I said to him, I'm like, will you tell me a story? So I'm going to read for one. I'm like, tell me about your biggest case, the one that's most memorable. So I should mention that the TAT program stands for Teen Acceptance and Trust. His first client helped him name it. Rob has tattoos all over his body, and so that's where the TAT came from, and his first student thought that that was like a really good name. So this is Rob. Every teen that has been referred and decided to continue with the program has honestly been considered a success in my eyes. However, there are always standouts when I look at the array of my kiddos. The first is a younger youth who was reasonably quiet during our first couple of meetings. We were spending our hour together, and they mentioned our previous session in which I had mentioned my partner. They asked if I met my boyfriend, and hesitantly I said yes. I was never sure what the reaction would be, especially knowing the views of my area, and I didn't want to cause a discussion I was not equipped for. In this case, though, it was a comforting detail. It allowed them to open up to me about their own sexual identity that they had no outlet for. They were excited to be able to come out to someone else and share that they had their first boyfriend. This is a standout for me because I think of when I was younger and had no one to tell or turn to when I needed advice or just an open heart. I wonder how long this youth had been sitting on their secret and trying to say it to others, including family, but were met with retaliation rather than love. My truth set a stage and provided a safe space for them to freely talk about their own life without judgment. Rob has had so many amazing stories. We had one kid who should have been a junior and only had 3 credits. After just a month working with Rob, he turned in 36 assignments. He quit skipping school. He's in an alternative ed and is doing pretty well. We had a trans young lady who, her family they wouldn't accept her. They kicked her out. She was on the street for 7 months at 14 and 15 years old by herself. A random stranger took her in and sexually abused her. He was able to eventually get her into a loving family, and they still talk periodically. She's exited our program because she is somewhere safe with 2 loving moms, and she's doing really well. Those are just some of them. He has had 15, I think, students since we started this in February, and it's just going and going. We're working really hard to be able to fund the program, but we'll just keep plugging away. So our next services are sexual assault services. These ones sometimes are hard. So one of our teams goes out with people when there's a sexual assault. If you've been sexually assaulted within 120 hours, you can get an exam. It's called a SANE exam. And there's a nurse that takes, DNA from all over, and then they can give that to police to be able to try to prosecute the offender. But then they come to us, and all the stuff that we do with domestic violence victims, we do the same thing with sexual assault victims. Also noting that 90% of domestic assault victims are also victims of a sexual assault within that relationship. So we just, same thing. All the services we provide for domestic violence, we do with sexual assault victims as well. We've been called out on calls with law enforcement for people who've been transported across state lines. So we're getting into like human trafficking as well, labor trafficking within these sexual assault services. There's a lot of labor trafficking in Van Buren County. We have a high migrant population. And so we're doing all kinds of things to try to make sure just all these people are able to be safe again. That's a key, just however they're going to be the most safe. All right. Okay, outreach services. So I kind of mentioned this. We have outreach for migrant populations, the LGBTQ population, men, elderly, and disabled people. We go into programs, we go into housing, we go into schools. Every one of these groups has unique situations that they may have different from what we would typically think of. And so I have one staff who is Hispanic, and she speaks Spanish, and she's able to go into the migrant community, educate them on our laws, because, you know, in Mexico, you can be 12 and be married and have sex, but in Michigan, age of consent is 16, right? So some of these young ladies didn't want that. They didn't want to be married off to this 30-something-year-old person. So we're able to come in and help them and get them safe. We have an attorney we work with out of the YWCA in Kalamazoo, and she can help them get what's called a U visa, and it's a 4-year visa to keep them safe here while they work on trying to get a full visa or get somewhere else safe. So men, so 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men are victims of domestic violence, but only 1 in 16 men report it. If you looked around the room right now, somebody here has probably experienced domestic violence. Many people probably have, in everything from verbal to physical to whatever else. This looks like an amazing group of people. So you probably might not look at the other person and be like, oh, that's happening. You're not going to think that, but it's happening. It's happening everywhere. It's happening all the time, and it's happening to men. There are men on men. There are women on men. There are children. Men are being abused. They're just not reporting it. They're not reporting it because they're ashamed. They're embarrassed. So we want to make sure that men know that they can come into us. I have 3 men that work for me. If they're not comfortable talking to me or they're not talking to one of our other ladies, they've got David, they've got Rashi, they've got Rob. They can sit down with any of them and get these services, okay? And then elderly. We partner with, it's called Caring Connections out of Benton Harbor. They're doing services for all kinds of elder abuse situations and things like hoarding and different things like that. So we work all together. We work with people. My oldest client was 98. Her son was abusing her. And, you know, it just breaks my heart because I don't understand. In my head, I don't understand how a child could do the things that some of these kids do to their parents. You know, taking their money, taking their things. You know, they'll get power of attorney and sell their house out from under them. They won't give them their medications. They're not taking them to church, you know. So I'm going to tell you this right now. If somebody, look around the room, somebody quits coming, go check on them. Make sure that someone's not taking advantage of them, because that's one of the first signs. When they're not showing up to things, if they're not coming in dressed as nicely as they used to, if they're looking rough, go check in with them, because somebody needs to, and things could be happening. Caregiver violence is a thing. Also, caregivers get frustrated. They get tired. So maybe pop in and say, hey, can we take Barb over to, you know, someplace and let you have a break? Because remember, these people are working sometimes full times and then caring for their loved ones, and they're getting tired, and then unfortunately they're acting out on their families. Excuse me. Okay, go ahead. Excuse me. So in 2013, I was asked to sit on an advisory council to provide offender services. The purpose here is that we were seeing the same abuser over and over, different victims. So how do we stop that? And so the court called me up and they're like, hey, we want to start offering offender services, and we want to be able to give these offenders tools, education, so that maybe we're not seeing this repeat over and over and over again. So I was on a committee. We oversaw the program for 3 years, and then in 2016, Chief Judge Brickley, she came to me and she said, will you take over the services? So we've been doing them since 2016. Our program is victim-centered. They have to acknowledge what they've done. They have to take responsibility for what they've done. They are in group. They're sharing. If they do not acknowledge it, they are not successfully completed. So for example, I had one guy, he participated the whole 36 weeks. He made good statements. He was getting it, we thought. And then at the end, he gave a presentation in which he once again, blamed his victim. I wouldn't sign a certificate. I said, you have two choices. You can be unsuccessfully discharged or you can keep going until you figure it out. He kept going, and he graduated a month later. We have seen situations, which probably isn't surprising. I think of one gentleman who, when he was giving his final presentation, he sat down and said, here is my PSI, my pre-sentence investigation. He said, within this, I have been arrested 16 times for domestic violence. He said, I abused my grandmother, I abused my mother, and I've abused 6 different women. I've never spent more than 9 days in jail. Until he was on bond for abusing his wife, and he broke every bone in her face. Then he was sentenced to prison. He went to prison for 2.5 years, came to our program, and he said, this never should have happened. When our abusers are saying this never should have happened, we've got a serious problem. I had another gentleman who had told us he'd been abusing women since the early 80s. He says, I've probably abused over 100 women. I've never been sentenced to a program like this. Almost all of our men have said they wish they'd have had it younger, wish they'd have had it the first time. We worked on that. Now we have first-time offenders that are arrested. They're coming to our program. We have a shortened program for that as well. We have had very good successes. We have had 185 men graduate from the program, 15 women. We've had only 13 reoffend, at least in Van Buren County. I don't know if they go somewhere else, but I follow them. We have had what I call small successes in that a gentleman came to us, and that's another great thing. They're coming back to us on their own. I never thought that would happen. So he came back. Mike and I started this program. Mike just left in August, and so we were together for 11 years. He came back to Mike and he said, my wife and I got into an argument again. He's like, I think I want to do a refresher class. And Mike's like, well, tell me what's going on. For 26 years, him and his wife could not get into an argument without him beating her. She had black eyes, she had broken bones, all of it throughout their relationship. This time, he said, I punched a hole in the wall, I smashed the dog cage, I didn't touch her. And we were like, okay, that's a win. Now let's keep working on it. And he came back to class on his own for 10 more weeks. We also do anger management, just grudgingly, because some judges still order people to anger management. Domestic violence is not an anger problem. Domestic violence is a power and control problem. But we'll do it. And then that way I can kind of insert my little beliefs in there. and then we have moral recognition therapy. That is a substance abuse 12-step program. We do that because 78% of the people either I've served or who are perpetrating violence are addicted to substances of some form. And we want them to know that that's not an excuse. So I always tell people, they're like, but I was drunk. I didn't realize what I was going to do. And I will say to them, well, so when you were drunk, did you know to go to the bathroom on your own? Did you know where your house was? Did you know, to pay your bill? Well, yeah, of course. Okay, then you know not to hit your wife. Boom. Sometimes they get a little more graphic. I won't do that here today. So we work on that. And we started that in 2019, and I think we've had over 500 people come through that program. It's a really good program. We have a men's group and a women's group. I do the women's groups. David right there, he does our men's MRT group. And then we have the domestic and anger management groups. We just partnered with Berrien County. We're going to be providing services there as well, starting in December. So, okay. And then we have an emergency response team. So I got a grant to do this because I feel like sometimes when an incident occurs and the police are called, we're ready to do something. But by 8 a.m. the next day when our office was opening, you've gone through a million different scenarios in your head. You've questioned yourself 100 times. And so people weren't coming to us. So we started the emergency response team. The DVRT, we go out with police when they go on a domestic violence call, if they call us, and we will sit with that victim immediately, tell them all the services we can provide so that they know they're not alone and they're not going to be left out in the wild with no resources. The sexual assault team, we go to hospitals primarily. We sit with them when they have the exam. We transport them. We make sure that they're safely getting home. And then recently, we combined it and we just have the emergency response team. So we're going out for any incident that the police might call us out on. Okay. So how do clients come to us? Primarily referrals. Police, we make little cards and we give them to the police, and they give them to every victim that they see, and they make their way to us, like I said, primarily for personal protection orders. We also get CPS referrals, DHHS. If you go online to My Bridges to apply for benefits, and it'll say, do you have any questions or problems? And you click on it, and if you're domestic violence, we pop up, and they can get referred to us directly that way. Michigan Works, the prosecutor's office, friends, attorneys, the county clerk. People are sent to us, churches. I've had churches send people, just people send people. And so I have had clients in the past who become my best little advocates, and every time they run into someone that they think is being abused, they drag them into our office. You need to talk to this lady, you know. So we've had that a lot over the years. Sometimes we get like a real paper referral. Sometimes they're just coming in. We're walk-in. You don't have to have an appointment. We're open 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we have a 24-hour crisis line that you can call, and one of us will get to you. And I kind of talked about this, but what do? We listen to them, we believe them, we validate their feelings. They are not crazy. Have you all heard the term gaslighting? Yeah. So most of these abusers will make their victim think that they're crazy, that they're imagining things. You know, they don't know what's going on. I didn't hit you, you tripped. And I've heard that over and over. Oh, I guess I tripped. You guess? I've had people come in with very specific stories, very specific. Like, he hit me and my tooth came out and I watched it roll across the floor into the register. And then 2 days later, she's like, I don't think that happened. And I said, what do you mean? I think I might have walked into a wall. You think, but 2 days ago, you knew in great detail. I said, so let's go back to that. Why do you not think that that happened? Well, you know, I was talking to him. There you go. So he convinced her that she'd imagined it, that she just walked into a wall. We help them determine what action to take, what action they want to take. So we're not, like I said, I've said this a million times, but we're not making them do anything they don't want to do. We give them options and we let them have choices, sometimes for the first time in their life. We assist with filing personal protection orders. So although none of us are attorneys, state of Michigan has a statute that says that a domestic violence center can help with anything related to a personal protection order. So we file the protection order, we schedule hearings, we schedule terminations, we schedule violations. A violation is when there's an order in place and the respondent breaks the order by contacting them, showing up, assaulting them again. We advocate with the courts, with police, with attorneys, with housing, making sure that our clients are getting the best services they need. If one of my clients comes in and says a police officer told them the next time they called someone's going to jail and I think it's me, I'm going to call that officer and say, what the heck happened in this situation, and did you say this to my client? 9 times out of 10, it was a misinterpretation because they're in this trauma state and they hear one thing and the officer actually said, I'm going to take him away next time if you call, but they think they're going to jail, so they don't call. We assist with locating housing. Yeah, I don't know if y'all know, but housing is scarce. There's not a whole lot of housing. It's horrible. We do not have a shelter in Van Buren County. We have never had a DV shelter in Van Buren County, so we're working with surrounding counties. But if you are in South Haven and you have 3 children that go to South Haven schools and the only shelter available is in 3 Rivers, that's a heck of a ways away for these kids to get to school. And yes, there's the McKinney-Vento Act, and that says that any child who becomes homeless for any reason, the school has a responsibility to make sure they get back to their school so their life's not too disruptive. But do you really want your 6-year-old getting picked up from a van and having to ride an hour and a half to school, an hour and a half back? And it's all these things that we have to consider. We attend all hearings with our clients. In Van Buren County, we're allowed to sit right at the table with them. We can't advise them, we're not attorneys, but we can sit there, and I sure the heck can sit between them and the victim and stare down the victim because I'm not scared of them. And most of these abusers, they're cowards. They are going after a vulnerable person. I'm not scared of you. I mean, I've been shoved in court. I've been called all kinds of names. I don't care. You can do it to me because I'm here for my client. So we do that, and then we provide support groups, supportive counseling, domestic violence education classes. Like I said, we have money, we have food cards, we have gas cards, we have cell phones, anything that we can provide for them free of charge to our victims. We do charge the offenders classes, we charge them, they have to pay us, all that profit goes back into victim services. So why do we do it? We do it because I have always felt that everybody has a right to a choice. Everybody should be safe. When you go home at night, you shouldn't be scared to go to bed. I can't tell you the number of times that I've picked up a client to take them to a shelter, and they get in the car and they immediately fall asleep because it's probably the first time they've felt safe and able to sleep in days, weeks, even months. And that it hurts my heart every time. So I do this because if I can help one person a week get away, if I can help one person a month even to get someplace safe with themselves, with their children, with their family, then I've made a difference in somebody's lives. And that's why we do this. And I don't know that I'm ever going to stop doing this. Like I said, I've been doing this 16 years, and I love what I do. I love going in there and knowing that I might make a difference in someone's life today. And I think that's all I have to say, and I know there's going to be questions and answers later on the next slide. If any of you ever need to talk, please feel free to reach out. My contact will be on the next slide yet. Call our office. If you'd like to volunteer, we have positions for the emergency response teams, fundraising, board members, any of that. We have 3 board members here today. We have Rob Rogers over there. We have David Hagan, who's our president, and y'all know Judith Halseth. She is our vice president. So we have those positions available. You could just come in and answer phones. And I just want to say, well, just remember, it's never the victim's fault. Keep your doors open if people need to talk. I know it's really hard sometimes if you have family members that have gone through this and they've gone back and they've gone through it. You don't have to agree with it. But keep the door open because next time they come through, it might be the last time. And with that, I know there's going to be questions later, so I will let you all get back on with your day. And thank you again so much for letting us be here today and for choosing us.